Some engines wear out, a handful refuse to, and no engine layout has produced more of that second kind than the Inline-6. It's long, it's naturally balanced, and most of the great ones were built in an era when over-engineering was simply how things were done. From American truck motors to German luxury sixes to Japanese turbo legends, these are the straight sixes that keep running long after the cars wrapped around them have given up. We're counting down 11 of them. Let's start at number 11. Number 11, the Ford Barra 4.0 liters, built in the one place most of the world never thinks about when it comes to engineering, Australia. The Barra powered the Ford Falcon from 2002 right through to 2016, and down under it earned a reputation that borders on mythology. It came in two flavors that matter here. There was the naturally aspirated version that did the everyday work in family Falcons, and then there was the turbocharged Barra that lived in the XR6 Turbo and the hotter FPV models, and that's the one that built the legend. Tidy examples of either cruising past 300,000 kilometers are completely ordinary, and plenty have gone much further. But the part that made the Barra famous is what happens when you turn the boost up. The turbo engine pairs a cast iron block with an aluminium twin-cam head, and that iron bottom end is the reason tuners treat it the way they do. 600 horsepower on factory internals is treated as a casual Tuesday in the Barra community, and there are reportedly built examples making four-figure power on the original bottom end. That kind of headroom from a family set-in motor is almost unheard of. The over-engineering is the whole story here. Thick castings, a strong crank, and a forgiving design that tolerates abuse most engines wouldn't survive. Because Ford never officially sold it outside Australia, the rest of the world only discovered the Barra later, through imports, and the moment people did, prices started climbing. If you're running one, the things to stay ahead of are the cam cover gaskets, which like to weep oil down into the spark plug wells, and the cooling system, which works hard when the engine is pushed. Keep the oil clean and the temperature in check, and a Barra will outlive the Falcon it came in. Number 10. The BMW M30 in its 3.5-liter B35 form. This is classic German engineering from before BMW got complicated. The M30 family ran for the better part of 3 decades, and across that time it became the backbone of the brand, earning the simple nickname the Big Six. It powered everything from the 5 Series up to the Big 7 Series, lived under the long hood of the E24 6 Series coupes, and even found work in boats and industrial settings. The construction is gloriously simple and gloriously strong. A cast iron block, a 7-bearing crankshaft, thick cylinder walls, and a single overhead cam driven by a timing chain rather than a belt. With normal care, these engines sail past 400,000 kilometers without drama. The architecture was respected enough that tuners like Alpina built some of their most famous cars on it, and BMW's own early motorsport 6s trace their lineage back to this block. Enthusiasts often call the M30 the last of the truly overbuilt BMW 6s, and they have a point. It was designed with far more strength than its modest output ever demanded. The weak spots are age-related rather than design flaws. The plastic timing chain guide rails go brittle over the decades and should be checked on high-mileage cars. The valve cover and oil pan gaskets start seeping, and the cooling system parts get tired. Address those as they come, and the M30 will run more or less forever. It's the kind of engine people buy a whole car around. Number 9. The Mercedes-Benz M103 and M104, 3.0 and 3.2 liters. When you talk about engines built to outlast the body around them, these two belong near the front of the conversation. The M103 arrived in 1984 as a single overhead cam straight 6, simple and tough, and it went on to power the W124 sedans, the big W126 S-Class, and the R107 Roadsters. If you've ever heard someone call the W124 the best-built Mercedes ever made, this engine is a big part of the reason. The M104 that followed added dual overhead cams and 4 valves per cylinder, so it breathed better and revved harder while keeping that legendary Mercedes durability. Both are famous for smooth running and genuinely high mileage. It's not unusual to find well-kept examples that have outlasted 2 or 3 sets of suspension, brakes, and interiors while the engine itself just keeps turning. The M104 in particular is a favorite, prized for its silky power delivery as much as its longevity. The honest weak points are worth knowing before you buy one. The M104 develops oil leaks from the head gasket and front cover as it ages, and certain build years used a wiring harness with insulation that degrades and crumbles over time, which can cause maddening electrical gremlins that have nothing to do with the engine's mechanical health. Sort the wiring, keep the cooling system fresh, and feed it good synthetic oil, and 300,000 kilometers is a comfortable expectation rather than a stretch. From European luxury, we're shifting to pure survival gear. The next engine wasn't built for comfort. It was built for places where breaking down isn't an inconvenience, it's a genuine problem. Number 8. The Toyota 1HDT 4.2 liters of turbocharged diesel. In the Australian outback and across much of Africa, this engine is the difference between getting home and getting stranded. And it has earned that trust the hard way. It lived under the bonnet of the 80 series Land Cruiser from 1990, and it's known to push past 500,000 kilometers while barely acknowledging the milestone. This is the engine that made the diesel Land Cruiser the default vehicle for the people who genuinely cannot afford a breakdown. Aid agencies, mining crews, remote stations, and convoys crossing terrain with no roads at all. What makes it special is its tolerance for the kind of fuel that would choke a modern engine. The mechanical injection system is simple, robust, and has no electronics to fail in the field, which is exactly what you want 1,000 kilometers from the nearest proper workshop. The design favors torque over revs, so it pulls heavy loads through brutal terrain year after year without complaint. It isn't completely without weaknesses. The 1HDT has a known reputation for cracking pistons and stressing the head when it's tuned aggressively for more power, so the ones that last are the ones run sensibly. Keep the fuel filters fresh, especially in dusty country. Watch for leaks around the turbo, and resist the urge to chase big numbers. Looked after properly, owners report these engines running strong well past 700,000 kilometers. In the right hands, a 1HDT genuinely outlasts the people maintaining it. Number 7. The Jeep 4.0 liter, the engine that traces its roots back to AMC and somehow survived Chrysler's takeover in the late 80s because it was simply too good to kill. If you know Jeeps, you know this one. It powered the XJ Cherokee, the Grand Cherokee, and the Wrangler for the better part of 2 decades, and along the way, it became a byword for indestructibility. In its high output form, it made around 190 horsepower, but the number nobody cared about was horsepower. People cared that it started in brutal cold, idled forever, and refused to die. 500,000 kilometers is well within reach. The recipe is old-fashioned and effective. A sturdy iron block and head, a simple pushrod valve train, no variable timing, no overhead cams, nothing clever to fail. Just low-end torque and a refusal to quit. There is one fault every buyer should know about, because the internet folklore tends to skip it. The cylinder heads cast around 1999 to 2001, often identified by the casting number 0331, are prone to developing a crack between the number 3 and number 4 cylinders. It's a real and documented issue, and it's the main thing that separates a good 4.0 from a great one. Beyond that, the engines run forever as long as they don't cook, so the cooling system is everything. Watch the radiator, keep an ear out for a ticking exhaust manifold, and stay on top of leaks at the rear main seal. Do that, and the engine routinely outlasts the body and frame bolted around it. Number 6. The Toyota 1FZ-FE 4.5 liters. Another Land Cruiser engine and another one built to go anywhere. The 1FZ-FE replaced the older 3F and became the heart of the petrol 80 and 105 series, the engine many markets got when the diesel wasn't on offer. Overlanders trust it the way they trust a good map. It runs in scorching desert heat and freezing alpine cold with equal indifference, and it does it smoothly, because a well-balanced inline-6 is inherently smooth no matter how big it gets. Reaching 300,000 kilometers is routine, and plenty go far beyond. The engine uses a timing chain rather than a belt, which is one less major service item to worry about over the years. It's worth being honest about the trade-offs. The 1FE is thirsty, genuinely thirsty if you have shown head gasket issues with age and hard use, so a careful inspection pays off. But its tolerance for lower octane fuel and minor neglect is exactly what makes it the engine of choice for expeditions far from anywhere with a fuel pump worth trusting. Keep the valves in adjustment, change the oil on schedule, and pay extra attention to filtration in dusty conditions. Owners regularly report these running strong past 500,000 kilometers, and they tend to do it without a single dramatic story to tell. We're halfway down the list, and the engines are only getting tougher. But how about one that's been quietly proving the point for more than half a century? Number 5. The Chrysler Slant 6, the 225 cubic inch, 3.7 liter straight 6 that earned the nickname the Leaning Tower of Power. By any modern measure, it's a dinosaur, but it's a dinosaur that simply will not go extinct. Introduced at the dawn of the 1960s, it ran in North America for nearly 3 decades, and in places like Australia and South America, it soldiered on even longer under the Valiant badge. 300,000 kilometers with minimal fuss is the baseline. That famous tilted layout wasn't a styling gimmick. Canting the engine over 30 degrees improved weight distribution, freed up hood clearance, and allowed a longer, more efficient intake manifold that helped the engine make its trademark low-end torque. It found its way into everything. The Valiant, the Dart, pickup trucks, boats, industrial generators, you name it. The durability comes down to one thing above all, which is that the block and rotating assembly, and on the early engines a tough forged crankshaft, were built to handle far more than they were ever asked to produce. In stock form, the slant 6 is barely working, and an engine that's barely working is an engine that lasts. Keep the carburetor clean and the ignition in good order, and it'll run even when neglected, though a little maintenance goes a long way toward keeping the oil leaks at the valve cover and rear main seal under control. Plenty of these have passed 500,000 kilometers without ever being opened up. It's an engine that quietly outlasts the cars it's bolted into, one body at a time. Number 4. The Ford 300 4.9 liters, the inline-6 that turned the F-Series into a working legend. If you've ever spotted a 40-year-old Ford pickup still earning its keep on a farm or a job site, there's a very good chance there's a 300 under the hood. 300 cubic inches of cast iron, built from the mid-1960s and still going strong into the 1990s, it was the engine that did the unglamorous work while everyone else argued about V8s. This engine was built to work, and it delivers. 500,000 kilometers is well within reach, and that's because of how it makes its power. It's a low-revving, torque-rich design that pulls heavy loads all day without ever feeling stressed, and low stress is the secret ingredient behind nearly everything on this list. The foundation is a robust iron block riding on 7 main bearings, designed with far more capability than the truck ever needed. The faults are minor and well understood. The 300 tends to develop intake manifold and vacuum leaks as it ages, so an unusual hiss or a rough idle is worth chasing down early, and the cooling system deserves the usual attention. Beyond that, it just keeps going. Ford built so many of these, and built them so well that they wound up running school buses, delivery fleets, irrigation pumps, and stationary generators, some of them turning continuously for years on end. It's not unusual to find a 300 with well over 700 kilometers still starting on the first try. Number 3, the Nissan RB26 DTT 2.6 liters, twin turbocharged, and the beating heart of the legendary Skyline GTR. Now we're firmly in performance territory, but this engine earns its place on a reliability list because of how it holds together under stress. It powered 3 generations of GTR, the R32, R33, and R34, and it was created for one purpose: to win in Group A touring car racing, which is exactly why it was so wildly overbuilt for a road car. The Australians nicknamed the car Godzilla, and the engine is the reason it deserved the name. In stock form, 250,000 kilometers is just the warm-up. The construction tells you what it was built for: an iron block, a strong crankshaft, beefy connecting rods, 6 individual throttle bodies for razor-sharp bouncements, and oil squirters under the pistons to fight heat during hard use. The special N1 versions even came with a strengthened block and tougher turbos, built specifically to survive endurance racing. Here's where I'll be straight with you, because there's a lot of myth around this engine. You'll hear that the RB26 holds 4-figure horsepower on a stock bottom end. That's an exaggeration. The factory bottom end is genuinely strong and reliably good for somewhere around 600 horsepower, which is remarkable for a 1989 production motor, but the truly wild numbers come from built blocks, not stock ones. Respect that limit, and the RB6 is bulletproof. Push past it carelessly and you'll find its real weak points, which include the oil pump drive on early engines and the original ceramic turbine wheels, both of which have a reputation for letting go under high boost. The timing belt is a belt, not a chain, so it's a scheduled service item you cannot ignore. Treat it right, and a well-built RB26 will run like a watch, well past 300,000 kilometers. Number 2. The Cummins 6BT, 5.9 liters, 12 valves, and arguably the single engine most responsible for the cult around Dodge diesel trucks. When Dodge dropped it into the Ram in 1989, it transformed the truck's reputation overnight and arguably saved the entire line. If reliability had a mascot, it might look like this. In a truck, 500,000 kilometers is just getting started. In industrial use, these engines have reportedly reached 1,000,000 miles, which is the kind of number that stops sounding real once you sit with it. The secret is simplicity layered on top of over-engineering. The 6BT shares its roots with agricultural and industrial Cummins engines, so it was never really designed to be a car motor at all, which is precisely why it lasts. It uses a robust iron block and head and mechanical direct injection, and the most beloved versions, the 1994 to 1998 trucks, use the legendary inline injection pump that turbo diesel people speak about in reverent tones. Fewer electronics and fewer complications mean fewer things to fail and easier fixes when something finally does. It produces a mountain of torque even stock, and it holds together so well under modification that doubling its output without sacrificing durability is considered normal practice. It does have one famous Achilles' heel worth naming, the so-called killer dowel pin, A small pin that can vibrate loose over time and, in the worst case, drop into the timing gears. It's a known fixable issue, and well-kept trucks have it addressed long before it becomes a problem. Keep the fuel filters fresh, mind the injection pump, manage the cooling, and a 6BT will, with no exaggeration, outlast its owner. And number 1, the Toyota 2JZ GTE 3 liters twin turbocharged and the closest thing the engine world has to a household name. This isn't just a reliable engine, it's a legend, and it earned the title honestly. It powered the 4th generation Supra and also did duty in the Aristo, the car the rest of the world knew as the Lexus GS. And there was a naturally aspirated sibling, the 2JZ GE, but it's the twin-turbo GTE that everyone hunts for. Stock, these comfortably reach 250, 0 kilometers, and the well-maintained ones have been documented going far, far beyond. The foundation is a closed-deck cast iron block that is almost comically overbuilt, paired with a well-designed head and sequential twin turbochargers that deliver smooth, linear power across the entire rev range. The real magic is in the unglamorous details. Large main bearings and generous oil passages that keep everything properly lubricated, even when the engine is under serious stress. That strength is exactly why the 2JZ became the holy grail of engine swaps, the first thing drifters, drag racers, and street builders reach for when they want big power that won't grenade. It's widely regarded as capable of handling roughly 600 to 800 horsepower on its factory internals, a figure that still makes modern engineers raise their eyebrows. That's the kind of built-in margin the industry simply walked away from. But brute strength is only half of it. In stock trim, the 2JZ is silky and refined, happy to idle in traffic and cruise all day, and it's that blend of civility and indestructibility that sets it apart. The few things to watch are the variable valve timing system on the later engines, which needs proper maintenance to stay healthy, and the fuel injectors which wear over the years. Keep the oil fresh, the cooling system honest, and the turbos in good order, and a 2JZ will run effectively forever. Decades after the last one left the factory, people are still tracking them down and paying real money for tired, high-mileage examples just to build them again. That tells you everything. So there they are, 11 inline-6s that genuinely earned the word unkillable. But here's the part that matters more than any casting or any horsepower figure. Not one of these engines is bulletproof on its own. They last because someone changed the oil, watched the temperature, and fixed the small problems before they became big ones. Treat any engine on this list that way, and it'll repay you with hundreds of thousands of trouble-free kilometers. Now I want to hear from you. Which of these have you actually owned, and how far did it go before it gave you any real trouble? Drop it in the comments, because the people deciding what to buy next are reading them. And if this was useful, subscribe, because there's a lot more of it coming.